Hello fellow humans and welcome to the 121 tech review, a vehicle that is very strong and unfortunately somewhat underrated and essentially only has one major weakness. And now, let's have a look at the statistics of all the vehicles, and then after that, let's play them. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my Twitch, link to that is in the description. Now, the Type 58 already starts off with 200 alpha damage, which is relatively high for a tier 6, and that trend does continue on. Relatively low penetration over high alpha damage, that is the trend for this line here as well. The tier 8 is featured twice because it has two different guns, one with 280 alpha damage, one with 400. I personally use the one with 280, however, I would recommend to try both. The differences are essentially in that one has higher alpha damage, but worse penetration and worse DPM, given this one has worse accuracy and lower aim time. This line is a line of bad gun depression. 7 degrees on the Type 58 is the highest it'll get. The mobility is relatively good and does increase as you go up the tiers. The tier 6 and the tier 7 has almost identical mobility, when the tier 8 then does perform better. Same with the tier 9, and then the tier 10 has another massive step up to 34 effective horsepower per ton, which is quite a lot, and very high traverse speed. In terms of the armor, again, you have a very straightforward step up here. They have very strong turrets, very easy pennable hulls. That does go through the entire time. Now we can have a look at these statistics as well to see which one performs the best. The tier 8 is the one that dips the most. However, mind you that these statistics are concocted from a variety of factors. While they may seem like a good indicator, they're never 100% conclusive because you don't have every single factor that plays into them, and they're just numbers. Talk about equipment, ammunition loadout, and all that kind of stuff at the end of the video. Let's have a look at the 121, and with 6 degrees of gun depression, you can't hide the cupolas. So the cupolas are always a weak spot. The lower plate is obviously always a weak spot. The sides are relatively solid at 83 millimeters, which means you can get some bounces off the sides. Side scraping might be a problem because of this plate up here sticking out. However, it still might work out just about fine. Now, in the middle of the turret, you can be penned right here, and obviously on the cupola as well. Upper plate is about 250 to 260 millimeters, which means I would recommend wiggling this tank back and forth, because then some standard rounds at tier 10, especially those of medium tanks, will not be able to penetrate. However, everything else is going to go straight through, which is why something like enhanced armor can boost that to about 260 to 65, so you can sleep easy of not being penetrated to the front by a lot of standard rounds at tier 10. Type 58, it's basically just a copy of the T-34-85, and it plays exactly the same, which means if you've played the T-34-85, you will exactly know how to play this one, and the other way round as well. Now, copying Soviet equipment is never really a good idea, given that the Soviets had a doctrine of, it'll work for enough time, it doesn't matter, whatever, basically. So it's a solid tank in Blitz, though, because it doesn't break down every 5 meters, and you need about 12 million spare parts per mile, so it does work out just fine. 200 alpha damage is obviously very nice. You have higher alpha damage, what tends to be the norm at tier 6, which is around 160 for medium tanks. Even tier 7 medium tanks tend to have still 160 in some cases. Now, this tank is obviously, in terms of armor, there isn't much to be had, just like with pretty much any tier 6 medium tank, there isn't much there. So at this point, all you can essentially do is brawl with the enemy, and this is a very, very straightforward tank. Like, it has solid enough mobility. The mobility does increase up, like the tier 10 is a lot faster than tier 6, which is a nice thing, right? You have a very linear line, basically, as in each tank is a step up of the previous one. It's not like, let's say, with the T-57 Heavy, where you go from a light tank to a medium tank to a heavy tank, which doesn't make any sense. So this is a very, very good line for that, and most of the tanks in the line are also relatively solid. The tier 8 and the tier 9, they're a bit wonky at times. However, the tier 9 even used to have 3 degrees of gun depression. However, that got changed, so it's good now, pretty much. And personally, I'm not a big fan of this line. It's not that I don't enjoy it, it's just I like to play with gun depression. And personal enjoyment is obviously a big factor in World Tanks Blitz, if not the biggest. It doesn't matter how the statistics of a tank are, how well it's performing. If you don't like it, it ain't for you. It's that simple, because Blitz is supposed to be about fun. It's about having fun. It's about enjoying your day. That's what it is. Enjoy your life. You only have one. But the Type 58, that is relatively easy. It's a straightforward tank. Nothing special about it. It's got the mobility. It doesn't have any armor, but it's tier 6, so nothing has, except for the heavies. And it has a solid gun. You know, 1,800 DPM, that's fine enough. It's not amazingly high. And the penetration is 128, which is something you're going to have to be wary of, especially if you play against tier 7s in a tier 7 heavy tank match. You know, against a T29 or something, you're not going to pen that. So it is going to be somewhat questionable. You also have the highest gun depression in the line, 7 degrees, which is where I start to like it. Basically, like 7 degrees is the minimum I want. 8 more better. More better is better more. So the mobility in this tank, again, not that great. But the tier 7 has very similar to it. And as you can see, 2.6k damage right there. Just rack up some shots. It is relatively easy and straightforward to play. Just your bang old average medium tank with higher alpha damage, which means that you can out-trade a lot of tanks, which is a great thing to do. If you can out-trade your enemy, you're already golden because you do more damage than you lose in hit points. Which is exactly what you want to have, because by the time your hit points are gone, you've done 3k damage, and if you do it correctly in this case. So now, only a KV-1S left, which is very easy to take out from here. He's not looking. And, you know, this is a very, very solid little tank. And it does also lead to the 113 line, which is basically, I'm reviewing it twice now. It's a bit weird, which is why I'm not really talking about it too much, because I've already reviewed it, and I'm like, I've done it before. Like, yo, but still, it's a solid little tank. It does what it's supposed to, and it's just about fine. And, yeah, that's an ace, because why not? Yo, it's cool. Why not? Now, the T-34-1 with 280 alpha damage, 180 millimeters of penetration, which is solid for tier 7, horrible for tier 8. This tank is very long, kind of, which is not that great. You have 6 degrees of gun depression with this gun, which is, yeah, it's just not that great. Port Bay is an easy map to play. All you're going to do is take this ridgeline, take this control, and boom, you have a free win right there. Because you can control the map. Counter is very simple. Wargaming has designed the maps to be fought in the middle of the map. Duh. Which means if you control the middle of the map and the enemy team doesn't, you have an advantage, because that's where you're supposed to fight. Now, SC-100, you ideally want to peek when it's reloading. At 280 alpha damage, again, you have an advantage compared to some of the medium tanks, even some of the tier 7 heavy tanks, which is obviously a great thing to have, because that way, it makes it easier to play. If you out-trade an enemy by default, you have to peek less, you'll do better. And again, the biggest weakness of this thing is its gun depression. The rest of it, it's perfectly fine. I mean, the dispersion while moving is not really that great, and so this is one of the vehicles that's like, you want to aim, right? After you move, you want to stop, you want to aim, you want to get your shot in properly. Because while you do have 2,200 DPM, it cannot make up for the fact that if you miss 10 shots, it is gone. Now, here, again, up here, map control. I know where the enemies are. I know what's going on. I can get shot here. I'm very much aware of that. However, there is 2 free one-shots down there, so I might as well take them. And there you go. There's the gun depression problem that I kind of don't like. But if you don't mind the lack of gun depression, this can be an absolutely great line. Can definitely be very much worth it. The armor of this tank, again, you have cupolas on the turret, which can be pinned. You can't go hull down anyway, because you only got 6 degrees of gun depression. And you have a hull that is fine enough, basically. It will stand up against lower tiers in some cases. However, equal and especially higher tiers are going to go straight through the front plate, be it a couple of, you know, random bounces that happen to pretty much any tank. And there we go, first class, because why not? The tier 8, the T-34-2. Now, this tank, weirdly enough, the T-34-3 isn't the tier 9. What was Wargaming thinking? Now, this tank has 2 different guns. 400 alpha damage, 280 alpha damage. I prefer the 280 alpha damage one. Don't know why, but it depends really which one do you want to play. Which one are you more comfortable with? Which one do you enjoy more? Obviously, researching both, you only have to research one of them to get to the 120. So that's the one I would recommend the more, obviously, because it's easier to get. However, it's really up to you which one you want to play. Especially if you want to keep playing this thing after you've already done the research, which doesn't happen a lot, to be honest. Then you can choose whichever gun you want, because in terms of performance, they pretty much do about the same. You pretty much do about the same if you know how to use the vehicle. Now, you only have 5 degrees of gun depression with this vehicle. Another step down. It's not that great. The accuracy blooms out quite a bit, especially with the 400 alpha damage one. And the dispersion on the move is horrible for this vehicle. Same goes for the Tier 9, same goes for the Tier 10. You do not want to fire on the move with these vehicles because you're not gonna hit anything. Especially the Tier 10s. It's 0.24. Standard is about 0.10. So that's really bad. And yeah, besides the gun depression, those are the 2 most obvious built-in weaknesses of this line. Movement dispersion, gun depression. That's what the balancing factors of this line are. Besides, obviously, it's all other factors that... Obviously, it doesn't have 7,000 DPM. That wouldn't be balanced. Blitz, for the most part, is relatively balanced. There are a couple of outliers, like a Smasher, like an Annihilator. They stand out, but for the most part, if you have a tank, that tank can beat any tank as long as you're a decent player and you know how to use that tank. That's the same case here as well. Now, if you're a newer player, if this is your 4th, 5th Tier 10, you might want to be getting this thing with the 400 alpha damage gun, because, again, if you have a gun that has higher alpha damage, you have to peek less, you have to make less thoughts on when to peek, where to peek, you have to think less, you know. You still want to be able to use that gun properly, however, you can use it better to your advantage, because, again, 400 alpha damage, you gotta peek less, you gotta take 4 shots, then your alpha damage is done. Basically, with this one, it's 5, 6, 7 to get that same potential done, and the more you gotta peek, the more potential you have of getting shot and penned. Now, at this point, the enemy team are very much stuck in our spawn, which is just very funny, and nothing happens here, really, so I'm just sitting here around and waiting for something to happen. Let's see the dynamics. It's, again, you do not ever gain from rushing in prematurely. If you pop off before you should, you're not gonna have a great time and people will hate you for it. That is something that is true in Blitz and applicable in life as well. Don't pop your champagne in people's face. Now, anyway. Now, the Löwe is obviously very high HP. I don't have any gun depression here, so I'm sort of going down here. I know, the Löwe, some players have sort of like a primitive aura to them, right? You can sort of see by the way they're moving is like, okay, this guy's not the brightest, right? And I can see that with the Löwe here. So at this point is, okay, he wants the T-49, understandably. So at this point, I'm going to hide behind the trucks. He's going to go for the T-49. I can get 3 shots into him. Boom, easy. There we go. And ain't that lovely? Now at this point, Progetto, I can see him. I can see you people. If you can see the enemy can see you. The enemy knows where you're gonna go, right? So think about what you're doing, because, you know, otherwise that happens. You just push in and you die. Obviously, if you're a one-shot Progetto and you push a 1200 HP T-34-2, it's not gonna go well for you, unless I miss. Then it's gonna go well for you because you can get the whole clip off, obviously. So be competent and be aware, basically, of your surroundings. The bigger of a picture you have of what's going on, the better you'll be, pretty much. Because then, for example, in this moment, I have no idea where the chieftain is. I have absolutely no clue. I know that he was somewhere back there with the MX, right? But at this point, he could have gone all the way around the map and could be behind me right now. I have to be aware of that. I have to know, okay, he could have done that. Which means I have to factor that in what I do now. Now, obviously, the VK is doing a great job here at being the shot sponge for me, and also doing great damage himself as well. And we take out the 2 FTU. Now, at this point, 1 minute 40 left, not really that much of time. And I'm telling him, you cap, I look for him. But the second I say that, he gets spotted, and we find him, and now we can go for it. So, Chieftain is a solid vehicle. It was sold for 4,000 gold. Can definitely get it. However, again, it doesn't matter what tank you play. If you're the better player, you're still more likely to win. That's how it goes. The player has a lot bigger influence on a tank than the tank itself, right? Because the tank itself does nothing. It sits there and waits. It has statistics. It has pre-baked configurations. However, it is up to player to use it. So yeah, nice strategy there. So that's about it. Now, in terms of which gun you use, again, use whichever one you do better. 4,500 damage with this little tank. It's not about whether the tank is OP or not, whether the tank is good or not. It's about two things that really do matter. It's the raw statistics of the vehicle. Can you interpret them? Can you use them? And do you enjoy it? That's what matters. Right? The raw values of the tank. What do they mean? In this case, they mean 400 alpha damage of the tier 9. Now, all these games that you just saw happened in a row. This one as well. The tier 10 one happened a bit later because I got bored. But all these are in a row now. Which is how it should be, right? Because that's a big problem, right? I have with a lot of replays and a lot of stuff that if you always make it look better than it is, you know, you're gonna think that everything at one point is OP because that's not how it works. OP, a tank's OP when people perceive it as OP, and that's it. It's subjective. Now, the 120 is definitely not that, and I very much perceive this as a bit of a why does it exist kind of vehicle. And it does have its strength. It has very, very strong aim time. However, again, the dispersion is absolutely horrible, which means you can look at that aim time. It just whoop goes straight together. And just like that, Standard B just exploded. He exploded through a table. Would be funnier. But as well, extremely good aim time. Horrible on the move dispersion. That is something you have to deal with. You want to stop when you fire this tank. You got heat rounds here. It's not the highest penetration. Heat rounds is not. However, they'll do, basically. You calibrated on this thing can be somewhat useful in some cases. I would probably use it as well. I'm calibrated on this gun. Obviously, you got the heat. You got DPM that's already not that great. You have 400 alpha damage, which is the higher for tier 9 medium tanks. So it can definitely be very useful here. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm just brawling with the 10s, right? Because I don't really care in a situation like this. I'm like, yo, come at me, bruv. I know I'm better than you. And if you have the confidence to do that, if you have the knowledge and the confidence to do that, then you can pull it off very easily. Be confident in your own ability, but be aware of your own flaws. If you do that, if you know what you don't know about the game, you'll do just about better, and you won't die with just 3k damage, for example. And now we go to the crown jewel, the master of disaster, the 121. 420 alpha damage. Now, is this tank on a roll? Who knows? 420 alpha damage is obviously very nice because you can outtrade a lot of enemies. If you can outtrade the enemy, you have to shoot less. You know, he has the peak. For if you fight an E50M, E50M is a very, very strong tank, but the E50M cannot out damage you, right? Because the E50M has to shoot twice for every time you shoot to get an advantage. If you trade 1 for 1, the E50M loses. That's exactly what makes this thing strong. You have a tank that has high alpha damage. You have extremely high DPM as well, at 3,500 almost. So, whether you use calibrated or not, that's up to you in this case. You have high alpha damage, high DPM. This gun is an absolute monster of a gun. The gun itself is absolutely broken the way it is. However, it's obviously balanced by the vehicle. Front plate, relatively easy to pen. If the enemy is either using premium rounds or just firing straight at it. The turret is very, very good. However, balanced by the lack of gun depression, so you won't be able to use the turret in as many positions and cases as you would want to. And that's how it works. Things depend on each other. It's not like one thing is there in isolation, right? Look at the bigger picture, people. It can be very helpful. This thing, again, speaking of big, the dispersion is horrible. Which means, if you're moving this thing around, look at how this thing goes up. So, you have a tank that is very much designed to have high DPM, high alpha damage, but be fired stationary. Right? And it's balanced. It is fairly balanced because of that. Even though it has a completely bonkers gun and extremely high mobility as well, it is still a vehicle that is really balanced. It's a strong tank. It's definitely... I can only recommend this tank over a Russian medium tank, of course. This thing does way better than Object 140 or 62A. So, if you're thinking of getting one of those, get this one instead. That is my advice right there. And 7-0 in 2 minutes, because... Well, thanks Blitz, but it's 4k damage nonetheless, and it's definitely solid. So, let's have a look at the equipment of these vehicles. Consumables, very standard. Provisions, also very standard. Ammo, very standard. Some of them do have APCR, some of them do have heat rounds. I would still go for this diagonal line kind of out. Liar. Let's have a look at the equipment of these vehicles. Standard consumables, there are no special ones for these, so nothing to worry about here. Standard provisions as well. You can decide with a small kit and a protective kit, that is up to you. Some of them tend to catch fire very easily, so a protective kit can be somewhat useful. Ammo loadout, again, diagonal as always. And then towards the equipment, there are a lot of variables in here. First of all, you should never use supercharger, and I didn't equip that. Check your tier 10 tanks. Check your tanks. So I don't know what happened, but in some update, a lot of vehicles somehow randomly got switched to supercharger. It happened with a lot of my tier 10 mediums, and I know that I wouldn't be dumb enough to use a supercharger on those tanks. So check your tanks if you've accidentally been switched from gun laying drive to supercharger. Now, obviously, gun laying drive must have here. Same with optics, same with engine accelerator, consumable delivery system, toolbox. That is very much needed. Then, a vertical stabilizer or refined gun. They're not very accurate for the most part. However, they have good aim time, so it doesn't really matter which one of the two you boost. It matters which one you're more comfortable with. I prefer the vertical stabilizer. Play them on the move. You know, be more mobile with them. If you want to somehow play a bit more passive with them, then the refined gun would be the better option. Never use a supercharger, obviously, as I just said. Enhanced armor, improved assembly. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. 100 HP don't really make a difference. 4% hull armor and turret armor don't really make that much of a difference. The less armor you have, the more improved assembly becomes necessary. However, if you have already strong enough hull armor, as we looked at, then the enhanced armor can be somewhat useful. Defense system, I would definitely use that. Obviously improved modules. This is not an E50M, and I would definitely go for the defense system on this vehicle. Then the calibrated shells can be somewhat useful. The penetration is relatively low on the tier 10 as well, and on most of those vehicles. However, if they have APCR like the tier 8, then gunner armor it is. And I would also use the gunner armor at tier 10 because you already have extremely high DPM, so I would want to boost that a bit higher as well.